Hello and welcome to View from the Decks, the show where we take you on a journey down the Solent and examine the history of what we can see from the deck of the Steamship Shieldhall.
Netley's history has been relatively quiet compared to other locations this series has delved into, which summarises the area up nicely. But the local populace definitely sprung up around the abbey. Founded in 1239, the original Latin name of the abbey, Ecclesia Sanctae Maria di Loco Sancti Edwardi, translated in English to the Church of St Mary of Edwardstowe. Although the name Netley appears on historic charters, which is where the present day name is thought to have originated from. In the same year of the founding of the abbey, monks from the nearby Beaulieu Abbey arrived to settle in, although due to financial difficulties it wasn't until the intervention of King Henry III that the abbey was finally completed, with the king becoming its patron. After a stable few decades, the abbey's history slowly became fraught with financial trouble, facing bankruptcy on a few occasions. However, the abbey's early legacy was that the monks who resided there were kind and generous to those who travelled to the abbey, whether by land or by sea. Anyone who lived near the monks held nothing but the utmost respect for their peaceful lifestyle. Peaceful as the monks' lives were, we know history can be anything but peaceful at times. In 1535, King Henry VIII was starting one of his most historic acts in the United Kingdom, the dissolution of the monasteries, and Netley Abbey became one of the targets. The abbey was descended upon by the king's commissioners, and the following year, the abbey was surrendered to the king. All the residents of Netley Abbey returned to Beaulieu Abbey, until that also was surrendered to the king a couple of years later. Now the abbey was his, King Henry VIII started a major overhaul process to turn the abbey into one of the finest country estates in England for his treasurer, Sir William Paulet. Yet at the same time, trouble was brewing overseas for Henry. With the threat of international war looming, the rubble from parts of the abbey that had been demolished were used to construct Netley Castle, which is still visible on the waterfront to this day. Netley Castle was constructed to observe any fleets that may sail up Southampton Water to invade. It remained active until the English Civil War, when it was temporarily decommissioned, before being recommissioned for fears of invaders in the period following the English Civil War. When Charles II was restored to the throne in 1660, Netley Castle was finally abandoned and grew into severe disrepair. It wasn't until the mid-19th century that Netley Castle got a brand new breath of life. It was leased to several different owners, and over a few decades, each owner restored and added something to the formerly ruined castle. By the time the 20th century came around, Netley Castle was restored to a Gothic-style mansion on the waterfront. After the newest owners died in 1939, the castle was sold to the NHS, who used it as a nursing home. But as the years continued and the building required additional maintenance, the NHS decided to close the building in 1999. However, the castle was quickly scooped up by property developers in 2000, and the new millennium saw the castle restored to what we see today, a multi-residential home. Although the castle is a striking sight at the waterfront, another structure that can be seen at Netley is the dome top of the chapel at Royal Victoria Country Park. Believe it or not, this singular structure was once part of a significantly bigger building that would have once dominated the shorefront. In 1854, the Crimean War broke out. The medical situation overseas was known to be horrendous, and the plans for a medical facility on the shores of Netley were quickly laid out. 109 acres were dedicated to the site, and in May of 1856, Queen Victoria herself laid the first stone of the facility, which opened in 1863. The hospital had appeared to allow soldiers arriving from overseas to be taken directly into the building, as well as a train that could deliver supplies and staff directly to the hospital. Although the hospital was a marvel of medical science and engineering, the building's layout was known to be significantly flawed, with most patients' rooms facing inwards opposed to directly onto the water. One journalist in 1867 described hospital conditions as ghastly. Despite the pier not being used for patient transfers after 1901, the hospital was still used to great effect during both World Wars. During World War I, it's estimated around 50,000 patients were admitted to Netley Hospital, while in World War II, that figure hit 68,000. However, after World War II, the mighty hospital, once a grand building showing the finest medical science had to offer, started to fall into disrepair, and by 1958, the site was closed for good. In 1963, following years of neglect, a large fire and harsh winter rendered the hospital beyond repair. The army tried to sell the site, but with no one willing to restore the building, the hospital was slowly demolished over the following year, until one part of the structure remained, the relatively untouched chapel. After being designated as a listed structure, the Royal Victoria Country Park was opened in 1980, and today, the chapel stands as a monument on Southampton waterfront to the hospital that once was, to the major historical events it served, to the many patients who recovered within its walls, and finally, to the many soldiers who weren't given the chance to come home. The chapel also serves as an observation tower, with many beautiful views across Southampton Water and the Solent. From the water, the view of Royal Victoria Country Park and the chapel is certainly unique. With the historic photographs as references, you can easily imagine the vast building, as it would have once dominated the landscape back in the day. Book on board to experience the history of Southampton Water from the Steamship Shieldhall, and we hope to welcome you on board soon.